Welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody, you might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this is episode 213. Today is Friday, August 30th, year of our Lord 2024. We're going to get straight into it. I'm very saddened to see what has happened to this country. And more than anything else, how easily the mainstream media believes it is to lie to us, to lie to each and every one of us, regardless of your political party or affiliation, regardless of your beliefs. It saddens me to see how easily the mainstream media, this permanent political class, this prevailing corporate elite establishment, and all of their many interested parties believe it is to lie to us, and they make it pretty obvious. For example, I mean, just put yourself on trial. And I know for many of you out there, I'm speaking to the choir, but for the MSNBCs out there who are tracking the podcast, because I guess, my content provides a good uh, ammunition for their election season. For the MSNBCs out there, just put yourself on trial, or for the people who watch MSNBC, let's say, or listen to it, read it, whatever it is that you do, just put yourself on trial. Ask yourself, has it long been the consensus that headlines are intended to misinform? They're intended to mislead. They're intended to, clickbait. Just ask yourself that basic question, and then follow that question up by asking yourself, why is it then that I still give headlines any credibility, weight, or merit whatsoever? And if you can honestly ask yourself that question, that first question, followed up by that second question, you'll arrive at the same sadness that I have today, that I'm talking about right now. Is a good portion of our American society is still, still invested in the lie, the multitude of lies. We still kind of have that gut visceral impulse to need somebody to tell us what to think. That is the herald of this of that is the herald of the chaos to come. That is the defining hallmark of American society today, is that we still have this gut visceral impulse to need somebody else to tell us what we should think, how we should think. And I give you an example. This latest article that they put out was actually drawn from this podcast, which tells you, even if you're not watching the podcast out there, or a lot of people, quote unquote, aren't watching the podcast because the YouTube algorithm is gonna work against us at every turn. Even though there's not some million person audience, MSNBC's watching the podcast, and they drew from the podcast to write an article that has now gone viral, where they used a headline that was completely and utterly misleading and really dishonest. And the headline was, Minnesota Senate candidate Royce White says that females, women, women suburban voters are for suckers. And that was the headline of the article. They went on to quote me in the article, and nowhere in the quotes that they used or that they pulled from the podcast did I say that women suburban voters are for suckers. In fact, I qualified it a number of times, specifically what I was talking about. And what I said then, and what I'll reiterate, is this: if the Republican Party and any Republican candidate across this country thinks that it's more efficacious to pursue uh, women suburban voters rather than inner city working class blacks and Hispanics, or new voters, or voters who haven't voted before. And when we talk about, you know, women suburban voters, we're usually talking about a block of voters that has traditionally been involved in the political process, which is why it's considered one of the strongest blocks of voters or one of the most important blocks of voters. My point being is that um, for a lot of those suburban women, any of them that would be reading an MSNBC article, I mean, they've already basically told us where they fall on these issues. So it's kind of a self-eliminating statement, and it's just really a self-eliminating article. Again, anybody who would read an MSNBC readout blog post by Jahan Jones, okay, is telling us exactly how they plan to vote anyway. And thus, we really don't need to be pursuing those votes. We really don't need to I mean, the suburban women who have made a decision about Donald Trump versus now Kamala Harris, but would have been Joe Biden as well. The average suburban woman who's made that decision based on personality and not policy, they've already decided. And there's nothing that Donald Trump could say, and there's nothing that I can say that will change their mind. There's no version of Democrat light we're going to be to change the suburban woman's mind who thinks that Donald Trump should actually owe Jean Carroll $100 million for a sexual assault that they couldn't prove in a criminal court of law. If they actually believe that, if they think that that's justice, there's nothing we're going to be able to say or do to change their mind. That doesn't mean that we can't win. And anybody who says that we can't win based on that is lying to you because there's plenty of suburban women out there, plenty of suburban women out there who don't agree with that, who don't read MSNBC or who don't take MSNBC at their word, at least. There are plenty of women out there who don't agree with the liberal ideology whatsoever. There are plenty of women out there who disagree with the Democrat Party, who believe in having borders, who believe in God, who believe that women's sports should be reserved for biological women, that there are a problem, there is a problem with illegal immigration. There are plenty of women out there who believe a lot of the same things Donald Trump believes. If you let the mainstream media paint a picture of the American populace that would suggest Donald Trump has no female support, we don't want your vote because you are stupid. I can't say it any more plain. And I know I'm running for office. You're not supposed to say that. Don't talk to the voters that straightforward. That's not how you win elections. I don't care about that. Honestly, I care about the truth. The truth is, if you're stupid enough to believe that Donald Trump doesn't have any, women supporters, or that a Royce White, that I don't have any women supporters, you're an idiot. 3/4 of the campaign volunteers that have helped me get to this point are women, and we appreciate their help, and we appreciate their sacrifice, and we appreciate their time and their energy, and we appreciate that they're women. So, I mean, it's another way to use the women identity, to weaponize the women identity against the American people, against America itself, and ultimately against women. But they use this headline, and I got a text message from somebody who said that the atypical thing, my mother, my wife, my daughter, they're all suburban women. And I simply responded, I go, did you even read the article? In the article, the quotes that they pulled, the quotes that MSNBC used, uh, clearly showed that I never actually said that women suburban voters are for suckers. What I said was Republicans who have this belief that they're going to change the minds of women suburban voters that have this contradiction at the heart of their worldview, or this contradiction is a fundamental is fundamentally integrated into their worldview, where inflation, 300% inflation doesn't really matter much. I mean, it's kind of a here nor there issue, but women's reproductive rights is everything. And that single issue that affects women directly is more important than all the other issues combined. That woman who will pay the additional tax because the liberals and the Democrats are going to crush the economy, and you're going to have more inflation and you're going to be taxed more. The woman suburban voter who would make that choice and then justify it for whatever altruistic propaganda that's working in her mind, such as, hell, we'll pay more taxes for the young black kid who's less fortunate, who's at risk, the young black kid who's poor, or the young black kid who is suffering from social inequality and injustice. That woman who would make the justification to vote for Democrats so that that young black kid could have more of whatever she thinks she's going to get more of in the final result, uh, that woman's not changing her vote. She's just not. She's just, the contradictions are too deeply rooted. She can't see it. What am I not supposed to say that? And what kind of fault? And what I was saying is the Joe Frazier's of the world, who was my primary opponent, who explicitly said he's going to go after the suburbs because he lives in the suburbs. Those guys are losers. They what they believe is, and what they've decided is, they will die on the hill of trying to convince that woman that her vote is wrong. I'm not trying to convince her that her vote is wrong, because the contradiction is wound too tight, and it really is. And it's the same sort of worldview and mindset that used to and still does, think, well, yeah, we America should pay more. America should pay more so these, federally funded and granted NGOs, or whatever the case may be, these programs, or international collaboration, whatever, we should pay more so there'll be some mosquito nets for some kids there in Africa, right? But then still, we don't have a problem with Apple. We don't have a problem with Apple or the other big tech companies rigging the elections, like Mark Zuckerberg just admitted that the Biden and Harris administration pressured Facebook to go after their political opponents, to be biased in the way that they censored information, patently rigging the election. Patently, by definition, rigging the election, institutional corruption that had an impact, a substantial and measurable impact on the outcome of the election. On the record now, admitting it. We're okay with all of those big tech companies going into the Congo that was once oppressed, exploited by Belgium, right? It's part of that neo-colonial history. And we're okay with still going into the Congo and taking the cobalt out of the mines and sending the young African kids down into the cobalt to pull the cobalt with their bare hands. 15,000, 16,000 people just rumbling on top of each other to try and pull a day's worth of cobalt to give back to the mine, the mine management, the managers of the mines, so that they can have food and drinking water, or whatever the payment ends up being. I don't know. I'm not there. But I know it's a lot like slavery, but we're okay with that. And see, that woman right there, that suburban woman voter and her cuck husband are going to be the reason that this country dies. And I'm not afraid to say it. And you better not be afraid to say it. In this last 60 days, you need to be able to articulate that contradiction if we're going to save this republic and if we're going to win. Now, the good news is, I don't care what their polls say. I don't know why you people still believe the polls. Honest to God. All of you people who still believe the polls, when we remember that Hillary Clinton was up 12 points on election day in 2016, but you still believe the polls, huh? Okay. I don't care what the polls say. I'm watching the 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 response. I'm watching the feedback, and they can say, "Oh, well, X is, now for far right wing extremists." Okay, well, show me the social media site that's still well to be for liberals. Show me where the sane Democrat, leftist, progressive, communist, Marxist sympathizers. Show me their social media site, and let's go see what the reaction is there. Because Google is as liberal leaning as it gets, and all of the Trump content on YouTube is overwhelmingly in support of Donald Trump. I don't see much, and I'm looking. I'm searching Kamala Harris. I'm going to CNN. I'm going to MSNBC to see what the people are saying in their comments. And overwhelmingly, you see a good number of people saying, hey, you guys are making me vote for Donald Trump. The lies are getting so blatant. You're making me vote for, and there's a lot of that. Does that account for everybody? Absolutely not. Is the social media is social media a small sample size in general when you talk about a nationwide election? Of course. But make no mistake about it. The momentum is still with Donald Trump. And Team Trump needs to know that, and everybody up and down the ballot needs to know that. Don't let these people manufacture panic. Don't let these people manufacture panic. There's no reason to panic. A man was touched by God. He has survived an assassination attempt, by the way, that should be drawing much more media attention than it is. However, it would seem that as we can prove from uh, verifiable history documentation that there is this dangerous merger now between the security state intelligence community and the media institutions, and that they're working in conjunction with one another. So of course an assassination attempt wouldn't draw the same media coverage that you would expect. I mean, you would expect that the leading presidential candidate, at least when the assassination attempt took place, the leading presidential candidate almost being assassinated would draw nonstop coverage for many, many weeks to come. But it didn't. Now, Donald Trump hasn't ceased to draw mainstream media coverage nonstop for many, 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 many weeks, for years now. I mean, since 2016, the political coverage in this country has been dominated by Donald J. Trump. The man almost gets his head blown off, and it's lukewarm coverage at best. Cremated the body. I mean, if there was an investigation that you would run that would, and Senator Ron Johnson said this as well. If there was an investigation you were going to run around this assassination attempt that was intended to stoke skepticism and breed conspiracy theory, this is how you would do it. The way they're running this investigation right now, that's exactly how you would do it if you wanted people to believe that it was an inside job, that there's a conspiracy going on, that there's a cover up. This is exactly how you would run an investigation if that was your goal, if that was your intended outcome. It's mainstream. I mean, the lean is so obvious. And to go back to my point, uh, you know, they're just lying to you. They're lying straight to your face, and they're not even they're flippant about it. They're unabashed about it. They're brazen about it. It's right up in your face. And but my God, I don't even know. I can't even really say anymore. That I feel bad for people. I don't. I actually am getting to the point where I have more contempt than I do have empathy. Seriously, and I get it. I get it because I came from one of those communities. I came from a culturally Democrat community. And I understand, people having so much going on in their own life, just trying to make ends meet, that the politics kind of comes on the periphery. You kind of get your politics, third and fourth hand, fifth hand. It's a fifth order away from anything that's really, really central to your everyday life. So it's easy to get just, caught up in a sort of WWE, French fry with politics worldview. It's easy. I get it. I get it. Let me get my, let me just look at an MSNBC and let me, this is my cheat sheet. This is my cheat sheet. This is my guide, the hitchhiker's guide to the galaxy of what's going on politically in this country, because I got too much stuff going on to really pay close attention and follow up in detail with any of these stories. And then if I'm smart If I'm smart and I'm the media industrial complex or I'm the deep state and I want to really manufacture the consent, I want to really manufacture a consensus about prevailing politics in this country, what I'll do is I'll help create a bunch of ancillary, subsidiary media institutions that parrot the same narrative as the top guys do. And before you know it, any follow-up you start, any follow-up that you track, any trail, any thread that you follow ends up telling you the exact same thing. It's all a derivative of the accepted mainstream narrative. What saddens me is that people actually believe it. Whatever the mainstream media is telling you is a lie. That's probably the safest way to go about it. Honest to God. I know that makes people very uncomfortable. I get it. Honest to God, I get it. It's almost like, man, are people really that dishonest? Are people really that nefarious and deviant? And the answer is absolutely. And you better start from that place. And it's funny to me. It's funny that we accept nefarious, devious, mentality. We accept that it's possible when we want to, selectively. Like a lot of people out there will accept that Donald Trump has some nefarious, deviant plan to take over the country and have some totalitarian rule of right-wing fascism. I mean, some people honestly believe that. Strange, he was in office for 4 years and none of that really took place. Actually, none of that ended up taking place. And I don't really see anything that he said, anything that he's done that would suggest that he's going to do it this time. Now, if you listen to MSNBC or CNN, if you listen to sound bites or headlines, or you listen to something that was said by Donald Trump, misconstrued and reinterpreted, taken out of context by, I don't know, you know, Smirkanish, okay, from CNN. Yeah, everything's gonna anything anybody who wants to save this country says is gonna somehow be twisted into a nefarious plot to upend democracy. It's like, do you people believe that? Do you actually believe that shit? Honestly, in what world? In what world do you talk about white supremacy and neocolonialism and you talk about the dangers and the threats of white men, but yet you still listen to the mainstream media that is overwhelmingly ran by, owned by, curated by white people? And I don't mean to do the race thing. I just have to call out the contradiction of it. The contradiction of it is so obvious. I can't have a serious conversation with you. A lot of you people, I can't have a serious conversation with you. You're brainwashed, and you don't even see it. You're living in a cult. You're living in a cult where you actually believe that racism and white supremacy is the greatest issue this country faces. White men are a danger to our fundamental existence. They're an existential threat. But yet the majority of the people who own and control the media, the mainstream media that you consume, are in fact white people. How do you square that circle? I said it in the last podcast, but I'll say it again. Are you really so dense? Are you really so stupid that you would suggest in public, in public, in a public forum, like on social media in the comments, or on your own social media page, or on your blog or on your channel, or whatever the case may be, you would actually in public openly contradict yourself in such a way where you would suggest that white people, whiteness, white supremacy, neocolonialism, Western society is an existential threat to the human existence, or democracy, or civilization, or whatever the claim is. There's a bunch of them, but that's the gist of it. White man bad. You would actually make the claim that white man bad, but only the white men who disagree with your political platform and party? That the white men inside your own party aren't a problem at all? Or are you saying they're less of a problem if they tacitly agree with you for the time being. I mean, you got to be a fucking moron. I mean, what is more shocking to me than anything is that there's actually a constituency out there for this. This blows my mind. And then people will say, "Well, you can't talk like that if you're." Fuck you, people. Who are you to talk to me about what I can and can't, should or shouldn't be able to do running for public office? And we've allowed this type of corrosive uh, 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 undermining of of American of American minds. I don't know what else I don't know what else to tell you. It's fucking stupid. It's actually stupid. There is no other way to describe it. I've lost all my empathy for you, honestly. I don't feel bad. I don't. You know, because it couldn't get any. I could see if they were trying to, sort of shell game you and hit you with the three-card Monty, and sometimes they do. Don't get me wrong. A lot of it is, there is a good amount of shadow game, shell game, sort of three-card Monty that they play in the media. I understand that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. But if you took your own thoughts, worldview, beliefs, values, even the slightest bit serious, uh, you would be able to come to the right conclusion on your own. How have I followed a movement that has made identity politics the core interest, the core pitch, the core of the propaganda? How have I come to follow a movement that says white men bad, but it's the white men telling me? I don't know, people. I don't know. Just- what do you want me to say? It's not on me. I mean, this is the managed decline of the way. Let me talk about what I really want to get into today, because I mean that's not everybody. That's about one third. They say the elections are usually split into thirds. You got one third that are going to vote Republican, one third that are going to vote Democrat. The other third are up for grabs or not involved. That's just that's uh that's the conventional wisdom. So I mean, it's not everybody, but for the people that are over on that side, I'm not. I can't argue with you. You're gonna wake up when you wake up. Hopefully, it's not too late. Hopefully, things don't get too bad. But let me talk to you about how bad things could actually get. And let me talk to you about where they start. See, the reason they really don't like me, I said it before, but I'll say it again. The reason they can't stand me, the reason they're uncomfortable when I'm in the room is because I know the history. I know the history, I know the policy, I know the players. I know when the things were I know when things went into effect. I know when things became the agenda. I know when the agenda got up and running. We're going to talk a lot bit about that tonight. A lot of bit about that. Not a little bit, a lot of bit. We're going to talk a lot of bit about that right here, right now. China is your greatest existential threat. Anybody who tells you that China isn't your greatest existential threat is lying to you. Any one of these mainstream media outlets that plays fast and loose with the truth and softly or kind of casually talks about China as a competitor and not an existential threat, they're lying to you. All of the focus is on Russia. All of the focus is Russia, Russia, Russia. But really, China is the greatest existential threat to the Western way of life, to the American way of life. What is that way of life? I mean, we got to get back to some honest dialogue about what America and the West actually represent. What does the Judeo-Christian uh, ethic represent? What does Judaism what does Judaism and Christianity what do they represent? Well, one, they represent a departure from ancient civilizations that, let's say, practice child sacrifice. And that's not a comment about abortion. It's really not. I mean, I know that that would be the common thread to tie for the conservative movement, but I'm really not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that the story of Abraham uh, in the earliest days of this Judeo-Christian oral and written tradition, the story of Abraham is a story where up until that point, child sacrifice had been a norm in ancient civilizations all around the world. And what Abraham did, uh, or more importantly, what he didn't do was end up sacrificing his son for the God that he worshiped. And the God that he worshiped was one of the first gods in a pantheon of ancient civilizations that didn't require child sacrifice. It's not conjecture. This is a fact. Go to your ancient civilizations, go to any one of them. I used to have a big book in my room. I don't know how it got there. My mom was, I don't know if she got it for me on purpose or it was just, you know, a fluke or what it was, but there was a huge book in my room. I had this big, big, huge book about ancient civilizations. Anything from the Celtics to the Chinese to the Indian, uh, ch- uh, the Nordic, and the Roman, Greek, the Persian, all of it. So I was familiar with it, and I was interested in all of them. I mean, I was interested in reading about all of them because I loved history, and specifically, I loved ancient civilization. But what I know to be true is that when you dig deep enough, you find that ancient civilizations often referred to child sacrifice as a symbol of loyalty and submission to the gods that they served or the gods that they worshiped. But here comes Abraham, from some dusty little western corner of Asia, who takes his son up into the hilltop there, into the hillside, into the mountain, takes his son up to the mountain, and he's just about to sacrifice his kid for God because I mean that's typical of the time. And God says, "No, no, no. We're not doing that anymore. We're changing that." It just so happens that Judeo-Christian ethic would spread to the far corners of the earth, and you think that it's by accident. Okay, fine. Um, what also came through that Judeo-Christian ethic is this idea that made its way here to America and the rest of Western civilization that we don't necessarily we understand science. A lot of science came through the church, but we don't necessarily want to calculate every last detail of any particular thing, right? There's a part of the American spirit, there's a part of the Western spirit of the Judeo-Christian spirit that doesn't want to calculate the final result. Why? Because it's seen as an affront to God in many ways. At least I feel that sense of humility before God. That even if there was a way for me to have all the answers, I don't know that I'd want to. I don't know that I don't know that I explore that. On the off chance that the small space that we leave for miracles, for God to work, the small space that we leave for God to intervene, for God to operate, that small space outside of science where God lives and does what God does and works in great mysterious ways. On the off chance that me venturing into that place would let's say would offend God, would keep me from doing it. And that's a part of that American spirit. I'm saying this for a reason. Um, our enemies, the Chinese, they don't have that. They don't have those restrictions. They don't have those boundaries. They don't have that ethic. They don't have that culture. They don't have that boundary in their culture. See, and it's not by accident. It's not by accident the way things have gone, the way things are. I got to take you back to the history of it because if I don't use the history, people think that I'm just making stuff up. It's like it's conspiracy. But let me lay out the history so that you can put down the MSNBC and go back and refer to the actual history before they change it because that'll be next. They'll use artificial intelligence to completely wipe the internet of history and rewrite the history the way they want to. And as good as artificial intelligence is going to be, they'll probably be able to do it rather quickly, which is one of the most scariest things I think uh, I think about right now today is the potential for artificial intelligence to be used by tyrants to completely uh, cleanse and rewrite history. I mean, because if you get a book from a library, I mean, who's to say that this isn't some right wing conspiracy library? You won't know the difference. If you're 10 years old right now and 5 years, 6 years, when some of these things start really mattering, you won't even know the difference. But never mind that. Your elders will be dead, right? 16, 20 years from now, they'll all be dead. So we're living in some strange, strange times where things could go left really, really quick. But I don't even want to scare you with that yet. Let's not talk about that. Let's stay the course here. Go back to the history. In the 1970s, um, Henry Kissinger and Nixon, Richard Nixon, opened up our relationship with China and China as, the great new horizon, as a foreign market that we could utilize to aid the industrial turn of the time through low cost labor. Low cost labor would bring low cost goods. Everybody's quality of life could increase at a fairly reasonable price for all parties involved. That was what happened when we opened China up as this potential, land of opportunity, essentially, especially from an industrial standpoint. And we went in there and we showed them how to become the manufacturing superpower that they are today. Before we showed up in China, and don't get me wrong, China is an ancient civilization. In fact, the you know one of the most ancient civilizations in human history is the Chinese culture, the Chinese civilization, completely independent from that 5,000, 5,500, 6,000 year old Judeo-Christian oral and written tradition. Completely separate from that. They had their own civilization going. They had their own civilization working. And that civilization had achieved a great number of things. However, they were behind technologically, which is why when the Japanese finally caught uh, a rhythm and technological advancement, they actually were very close to conquering China completely. In fact, in many ways, they had subjugated China, and the Japanese plan openly was to use the Chinese people as slaves to expand the Japanese empire. But when we defeated Japan uh, during World War II, Japan was left in shambles and defanged, but China was also left in somewhat of a ruin. And before we went into China, it was a third world country. Before we went into China in the 1970s, it was a third world country by all measures. But by all measures, by any economic standards, by any industrial standards, by any technological standards, China was a third world country when Richard Nixon and Kissinger decided to go in and show them how to become the world's manufacturing superpower. Interesting, again, as I explained a couple of podcasts back, how we go into a country that was third world and we tried to exploit them for their natural resources. In this case, it was human beings themselves. We tried to exploit them for their natural resources in order to push our own economic agenda, political agenda. This one is tricky though. This one was a bit different. This China one is is something we got to take a closer look at. I mean, we didn't go into China for the cobalt or the gold or the oil or the rubber or anything like that. We went into China for a different reason. This is my theory of the case. We went into China because even then, China had a population. China had a population, and they had a geographical position, and they have certain geographical advantages that make them, let's say, as far from the West as you can possibly get, right? I mean, if you just break out your map and you look at where China is the polar opposite of America. All kind of geographical implications for that. And again, if I go back to the early 1900s, before the first two great wars, and we talk about the Mackinder land theory, where the British basically wrote a theory that says anywhere where you can walk to, you're at a military advantage against people that have to fly and have to sail. That's the Mackinder land theory, and it's taught in all your major European universities, especially in politics, poli sci, especially in the military schools. The Mackinder land theory is still pretty much the prevailing and conventional thought about geopolitical conflicts. If they tell you it's not, they're lying, and a lot of them will tell you that it isn't because they're trying to lie to you because they don't want you to realize just how up in your face the geopolitics of today really are and how easily accessible the history is. So us going into China was for a certain reason, and somewhere in there between the 1970s and let's say 10, 15 years later in the 80s and 90s, China became the manufacturing superpower. China became uh, its own big brother. China said somewhere in there, or maybe they were told to, and throughout this now, I'm gonna leave the door open because there's a question of whether or not it was always China's intention to use us to gain this power and then venture off on their own, or if there were Western leaders that always knew that China was going to get to this place and they intentionally helped China to try and supplant America as the dominant force in the world. Now, if you look at who helped them do it, being Henry Kissinger and some others, and the school they came from, the Frankfurt School, and some of these other, academic institutions, and what their core beliefs were about politics and humanity, then you can start to draw some more clear conclusions about which thing happened here. But either way, when China decided, time to stand up, time to become our own superpower. We have all the tools. We have all the resources. We are starting to have the technology. We have the industrial base to make a play at becoming the world's superpower. When that happened, Western leaders, for some strange reason, started to talk about the managed decline of the West. Hence the title of this podcast, The Managed Decline of the West. And it came on like a wave, a mockingbird wave, just very similar to how your mainstream media talks about Russia or any number of political issues now. It came on like a wave. You can go back and reference it. There were all of these political elites and thought leaders that concluded that America and the West was in decline, that the decline was inevitable, and that China was on the rise, and that their rise was inexorable. They called it the second law of thermonuclear dynamics, the inexorable rise of China. That it was axiomatic of human existence, that it was scientifically based. I mean, it was, when you say that the second law of thermonuclear dynamics is the inexorable rise of China, I mean, you're saying it tongue in cheek, but there's an inference there that the rise of China is so inevitable, you can almost call it pure science. And I reject that. I reject that. I reject that wholly. But this was the consensus: the rise of China and the managed decline of the West. that the West was inevitably going to decline, and the only thing that could happen now is that we manage that decline. These are your political leaders today. They're still managing your decline. They're still saying, they're still making a decision. They're still governing over whether or not you actually fight. And that's what makes it so significant when Donald Trump said, fight, fight, fight. That's how I read it. Now maybe I'm crazy because I actually would take the time to understand how the forces are moving and how the pieces are being played here on the world stage. But when I saw him say fight, 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 chills went through my body because I understood that our elites, our political elites in this country and in the West decided 30, 40 years ago that the West was in decline and that all we could do was manage that decline. And if part of that managed decline is killing the first president in a long time that stood against that status quo, then so be it. Then so be it. That's just part of the decline. That's part of the we have to manage this decline. And the number one way to manage the decline is that the people can never really be aware of it, and they damn sure better not stand up to it. They better not challenge it. They better not revolt against it. They better not challenge it. That's what the MAGA movement is really all about. This is what the beating heart of the MAGA movement is really all about. When we say make America great again, we're not talking about race relations. It has nothing to do with race. Get outside of your small bubble. Get outside of your own community. Think about the world because the world is thinking about you. I guarantee that. You may not be interested in geopolitics, Jason Whitlock, but I guarantee you geopolitics are interested in you. Make America great again has nothing to do with race relations. Make America great again is saying to take us back to a time, like RFK said so eloquently, where the managed decline was not the consensus. The managed decline of the West was not the consensus. America was thriving. America was our own manufacturing base. America had its own dominance and prominence and technological innovation. America had its spiritual house in order, somewhat in order, always flawed, but much more in order than it is today. A lot more marriages, a lot bigger families, a lot more faith and religious practice in the household. You can say what you will about that, but there's nothing wrong with going to church on the weekend and saying, hey, I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. Time to pray. Want to come together in community, in communion with some fellow members of my neighborhood and just be grateful. Be grateful for what I have and pray that it continues and pray for those who are, who are stricken with grief and hardship and pray for strength and guidance. Nothing wrong with that. Come on now. A lot of things wrong with the church. Don't get me wrong. I'm a Catholic. I know it better than many. A lot of things wrong with the church. A lot of things wrong with the Catholic Church. But nothing wrong with that at base, at bottom. Come on now. Come on now, nothing wrong with that. Your grandmother and them, they used to go and they used to worship. A lot of them still go and worship. In their final days, they're going to be worshiping. Guess what? No matter how anti-God and anti-Christian this country gets, you still go to a cemetery. You still go to a church or a place of worship to bury and send your loved ones off for the most part. Some of you getting cremated. Some of you. But a lot of us still go to that house of God to send our loved ones off because that's the great unknown. That's the real existential terror that we all carry. Let me get off on a tangent. My point is, make America great again is to go back to a time where we hadn't accepted the decline of the West. The decline of the West? Why does the West need to be in decline? I mean, the whole thing is a lie. There's nothing we need from China. There's nothing we need from Ukraine. There's nothing we need there in the Middle East. All of it was always a lie. And it was these same people who put together this economic structure that convinced us that we did need them. This whole idea that, and this is what I was saying to the Star Tribune the other day. This is what I've been saying on the campaign trail. This is why the MSNBCs and the CNNs never want to invite me on, because they know I go straight to the heart of the issues and I talk about things at a real systemic level. And when I say systemic, I'm talking about the academic institutions and elites that have brainwashed and convinced your average American citizen, or global citizen even, although there's no such thing as global citizenship, your citizen around the world, your average citizen who's touched by the many tentacles of these academic institutions and thoughts. I understand the scam, and I speak to it every time I get a chance. I don't let them distract me. I don't let them deviate from the point. I talk straight down the middle about these core issues, these core ideas. Henry Kissinger, the petrodollar. They put the petrodollar together, okay? The Mackinder land theory already said that he who controls the heartland he who controls Eastern Europe controls the heartland. He who controls the heartland controls the Eurasian world island. China, the Great New Horizon. The whole idea of realpolitik. Go look it up. Realpolitik comes from the school of Henry Kissinger and the many other thought leaders and international dignitaries in his cohort. Zygmunt Brzezinski, Klaus Schwab, he's the surviving acolyte of the school of Kissinger, chair of the World Economic Forum, and Yuval Noah Harari is coming right out of that same sort of mentality with a slight transhumanist bent and modifier, but the same sort of thought. That if we entangle all of the world's markets, economic markets, and we entangle all of their natural resources, we'll have peace. The peace was a lie, but even furthermore, the entanglement was a lie. The entanglement was a pitch that promoted and prioritized radical materialism and a consumer-based industrial boom. And the boom and the industrial boom that became consumerism and consumer products, the entanglement of foreign markets and natural resources was a necessity to keep people on the gravy train, so the materialism would reach a height where people would no longer care about their national identity. That's the scam of globalism. That's the scam of globalization right there. And so when you think about it, why is the West in decline? The West is greatly only in decline because we believe in these ideas. And also we deal with some real existential issues around birth rates and having children in general, mostly due to our own, sort of let's say, self-aggrandized and narcissistic view of the meaning of life. Yeah. Yeah, our own ambitions are now more important than having children. Yeah. Yeah, we have a sort of nihilism about human existence itself. And so we're struggling in the West and in America with birth rates. But other than those two things, other than believing in these ideas that the West is in decline, and then following up that belief with a sort of spiritual and existential crisis of not wanting to procreate, there's nothing wrong with the West. There's nothing wrong with this country. This country has every bit of natural resources, every bit of technology and innovation, and every bit of human resource, human capital, let's say, that we need to be thriving and prosperous. This is what Make America Great Again is really all about. This is what the idea is really all about. The West is fine. America is fine. In fact, let's even separate America from the West. Because this whole idea that America and the West are symbiotic is another lie. This isn't the West. We're the West, if anything. Europe is its own deal. And I've been saying this. That's what Make America Great Again means. Your founding fathers already knew this was a danger, to clump ourselves together with our European counterparts. That's why we fought a revolutionary war. That's why in order to beat the British, we didn't just become a part of the French, of France. We say, well, hold on, wait a second. We'll take your aid in this revolutionary war, but we're not going to come under the rule of France. Absolutely not. We're not European. We're Americans. We're Americans. And there is nothing declining about America other than our political elite who have already conceded it's inevitable. And I take you back to China for a reason. I mean, and this is a diabolical scam they got running with this China cover. Okay. And I was watching a podcast, and I, like the Sean Ryan podcast. We got a call into him or contact into him to hopefully get me on the Sean Ryan podcast at some point in the near future. But anyway, Donald Trump was on there. The last episode that Sean Ryan released was Donald Trump, and Donald Trump made a very, very important point in that podcast. In fact, I think I might clip it and put it in. I think I might clip it and put it in at the end of this episode, or I might go back and put it in as the cold open. Either way, he made a very, very important point about the trash coming from China. These are things that people don't even realize of why Donald Trump was such a great president. Just his mindset, just the things that he's thinking about, the things that he was considering that for some reason, and it's a reason I'm gonna get to the reason in a moment, but for some reason, a lot of us just, and I don't say us, I say the political elite in this country either haven't been thinking about or they've overlooked intentionally. Either way, it's the same net result. But he talked about the trash. He talked about the trash coming from Asia, and it comes through the current of the Pacific Ocean, and it ends up on our shores on the West Coast. And we pick the trash up for free out of the oceans. Not that we don't have a lot of our own trash, because we do, but there's so much trash. There's so little regulation on trash and pollution in Asia as opposed to America that we are literally taking out the trash for China and other Asian countries as well. And why do I bring that up? I bring that up because of what I said earlier, where that gap is, uh, in knowledge that Americans, Westerners, people with American spirit, that Western spirit, that Judeo-Christian based spirit, where we don't want to calculate out that final piece of the equation out of humility. The Chinese don't have that gap. So there in Beijing, the CCP has every single metric of things that have an implication for this asymmetrical, unrestricted war that's begun between us and China, between America and China. Every single thing you can imagine, down to the final little, the smallest detail, and they are cold and they are calculating. And where they aren't physically imposing, the Chinese people make up for it in their strategy. And they're showing you. We are in an asymmetrical culture war, an asymmetrical, unrestricted war. Economic, even the trash. I mean, I just know how and people will say, oh, well, you're a China hawk. And no, listen and read what these people are saying. Listen to how they talk. Listen to how Xi talks about. Look at the white papers that are coming out of China. Look, they're not hiding it. They're right up in your face with it. They're saying we're going to win the long game. Even the trash is being calculated. I guarantee it. They're probably weighing how many kilotons of trash are dumped each year in the Pacific Ocean and how much has to be moved or thrown out or disposed of or discarded by American resources on the West Coast. And see, now some of our politicians aren't thinking that because again, that Western spirit doesn't let us be so calculating. That Western spirit is something like, we want to calculate things to a point, but we want to leave room for God to work. We don't want to preclude the miracles. If we get too fine in the detail, we might run the risk of precluding the miracles and shunning God, out of our own arrogance, let's say. And there's a lot of merit to that. There's biblical reference to that. So, oh, you think you're too smart? You're so smart. You got it figured out. Okay, there's plenty of biblical reference to that type of story, that parable. So, just in general, our American spirit tries to leave that gap for calculation. But then there are these corporate and political elites that are too busy getting rich, too busy being in on the scam, too busy letting it happen, and they're letting it happen. And let me show you what I mean here. Again, I can't give you a better example than this. We open up China as the great new horizon. Because everybody talks about, oh, well, is a black jobs. This black jobs thing became a meme or a soundbite in the last couple of weeks because, Michelle Obama got up on stage at the DNC convention and said, you know, I think Donald Trump just might not know that the presidency he seeks is one of them black jobs, okay? All that bullshit, all that Aunt Jemima bullshit she was spitting up there, not talking about anything substantive about policy or foreign policy. Because good old Barack, I mean, he's as integrated with this foreign policy scam as any of them. But let's talk about black jobs. Let's talk about jobs in the workforce in general. Fair point. I'm glad you brought it up, Michelle. I think we should have a nice deep dive into the prospects of modern labor. Uh, when we opened up China as the great new horizon, we then made a concession that the unions, we used the unions as an excuse. We said the unions are squeezing too hard on American corporations and middle market, even small businesses. And therefore, in order to expand the industrial base and the consumer products and the overall quality of life, we need to look elsewhere to foreign markets so that we can find the labor necessary to speed up the process of, you know, of the economy, to build the economy. The way to build the economy is to loan more money for more labor, more production, and have more things. Okay, everybody has more things; they'll feel like they're more wealthy, and by some standards, you could say that that's a metric of wealth. But that's probably something we need to revisit, and reevaluate as well. We'll save that for another time. However, we open up China as a great new horizon, and we send our labor there. We send our labor there. We get low cost labor, which allows us to get lower cost goods, but yet our corporate elite continued to bring up the price because our Federal Reserve, our central bank, continues to hike up the interest rates. That is how it happens. I mean, that is how inflation happens. You think inflation happens here, but it actually happens here because the interest rates of the banks on the middle markets and corporations is actually what's going to be used for them to raise that bottom cost slowly over the course of 30 years. And before you know it, we've sent jobs to another part of the world, and they in that part of the world don't have the same sort of thoughts and beliefs about what is a fair day's wage and so on and so forth, because when you have a tyrannical and totalitarian regime, people don't like how much they're getting paid, and well, it might just disappear. I mean, we don't really have a problem with killing you. So, it's best to just kind of go along and get along. And so, we send our labor over there to a country where people are glad to work for very low pay, because their cost of living and their way of life and quality of life is by a completely different standard than ours. Which is just as an aside, which is part of the problem with the initial Kissinger thought, which can't be seen as an oversight, which can't be viewed as an oversight because it's so obvious. Yet when you mix two different cultures with two completely different economies and two completely different standards of life, qualities of life, of course there's going to be a huge gap in the labor. Of course, there's going to be a huge gap in the workforce. Of course, there's going to be a huge distortion in the way that work is calculated. Of course, yeah, yeah. Your American workers don't have a different expectation, have a different need, have a different baseline requirement to meet the cost of living in this country because the cost of living is set by the industries that dominate the natural resources or the essential resources, food, water, shelter, et cetera. Not to mention the consumer products that are relatively just materialism, but all of it is relative. And those industry leaders set that price along with the financial institutions. So, of course, it's easy to send your labor to China and say, well, some Chinese kid is willing to stitch Nikes for 4 cents a day, for 5 cents a day, based on a Chinese economy and market, based on a Chinese standard of living. Okay. Okay. So we went ahead with that. Fine. Got it. We went ahead with that. And before you know it, we worked our way into all these other countries for whatever reason, it's natural resources or whatever, Maybe there was a labor or a workforce to be exploited there, manufacturing, maybe not. Maybe there was just some natural resource that we wanted, that we, what is it? Tch, I don't even know. Bananas, whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't even, Banana Republic. This is where the idea comes from. Anyway, bananas, whatever it is, whatever that resource was that we wanted, we kind of started to build an economy in a world economy where we went to these other nations and we started to intervene economically. And before you know it, now you got this problem there in South America, let's say, where we deal with despots and warlords of socialist and communist regimes that put pressure, downward pressure, on your average citizen there in Venezuela or wherever else in South America. And all of a sudden, they start to think to themselves, well, if American work is if America is now being exported here, and my quality of life and standard of living isn't rising, the only answer is that I need to leave here and try and make it there. 'Cause I'm at the wrong end of this chain. I'm at the wrong end of this chain. You got a super wealthy nation that exports its labor or its ambitions for natural resources to this part of the world, and I'm here and I'm struggling to even survive here as it is, let alone this distortion of our market. So I'm getting the hell out of here and I'm going to make my way there. And then they get here, and these same political elites that set up this economic structure tell you we should take them in out of empathy and altruism. Now, the reason I went through that entire sequence of things is to tell you this: it's intentional. It's intentional. The whole thing from the beginning was to crush American independence. The whole thing from the beginning was to supplant America as the dominant superpower in the world. And they're using our people, and they're using our military, and they're using our technology to do it. Parasites. Parasitic, European, intellectual, academic elites. Managerial class. The managed decline of the West. They are parasitizing the American people and using us to proliferate a global economy that undermines America's dominance, that undermines America's leadership. And you think they're doing that for democracy? You think they're doing it for democracy's sake? Most of these countries that they go and deal with for all of these natural resources and quid pro quo trades, they're not democracies. China's not a democracy. The countries down there in South America aren't democracies. A lot of those countries in Africa aren't democracies. Ukraine's not a democracy. We're trading with Russia. Russia's barely a democracy. I wouldn't call them a democracy. The countries in the Middle East, they're not democracies that we traded for the petrodollar. Saudi Arabia is not a democracy. It's a monarchy. All of these countries that we went and did this foreign trade and policy with, we said we did it in the interest of democracy, but none of them are democracies. These people think you're stupid. No, they know you're stupid. And that's the tough truth that we got to face and confront now. 60 days out, I'm just going to be that coach that tells you to you like it is. I know it's not advantageous for me to do it. Doesn't feel good. It's uncomfortable. They know you're that stupid. They know you're that stupid because they control your information and they control your education. They're counting on how stupid they know they've taught you to be. They're counting on it. That's their backup plan. That's their backup plan is at the end of the day, we know we can pretty much manufacture whatever consensus we want because the people are as stupid as we taught them to be. Now their arrogance is where they're weak. Their arrogance, their sense of self-aggrandizement is where they're weak. Their arrogance, their rejection of God and the divine is where they are weak because the human spirit, it longs for freedom and it yearns for the truth. That's an innate quality of the human spirit that was given to you, granted to you by your creator. You yearn for freedom and you yearn for the truth. So no matter how much they try to stack the deck, there are always those few rascals, those few rebellious numbskulls, those few people out there that we need to formally re-educate, like the Royce Whites, who for some reason just won't take to the Kool-Aid. They just won't take. We offer them everything they could possibly want. An NBA career, fame, riches, power, popularity, influence, reach, a platform, an audience. We offer them everything they could possibly want, everything we would want for ourselves. We offer them everything we can give them, and for some reason, they just don't take. They're taxing you 3 times. First, they're taxing you by raising the interest rates, printing money you don't got, causing inflation at the bottom, making you pay the inflation price of goods. You're paying that. You're paying the price of inflation. Then your work's getting exported, which means your U.S. dollar is trading somewhere in one of these foreign countries, which means your military is not far behind, which means you're subsidizing that nation as well. And you are subsidizing that nation. The subsidiary of foreign nations is actually intended to prevent them from becoming first world countries because it's much easier to negotiate with a third world country. So your tax money, you're getting hit with inflation, and then your tax money is going to subsidize another nation to stay underdeveloped. And then when their people are displaced and migrate to your border, your government's going to pay them to come across the border and live in your neighborhood. 3 times you're getting hit over the head. Oh, it's not just once. Oh, this ain't just a one-time deal. This ain't just a one-time, I'm going to steal your shit and that's it. This is a perpetual cycle of theft from your permanent political class, your corporate, intellectual, academic, scientific, managerial elites. That's what this is. This is highway robbery. And it's all on the back of the American people. And the American people are sitting here thinking, well, why are the rates of obesity so bad? And why is disease at an all-time high? And why are mental health issues you're getting abused? And I don't mean to bring up, and this is where I have some split or some divergence from some of my conservative counterparts who say, oh, don't play the victim card. Oh, no. You don't know how victimized you are. I'm not the Sean Hannity types that are going to tell you a good, strong, pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality is what America's all about. Oh, fuck no, it's not. We didn't say that to the British Empire when they tried to hit us with an exorbitant tax. We didn't say, well, time for us Americans to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and meet the demand of that tax. No, we didn't. We grabbed the rifles. We said, we keeping these rifles you sent us, and it's time to go to war, bitch. That's what we did. Bitch, it's time to shoot it out. And I'm not saying it's time to shoot it out because this scam that they're running on us is way more elementary. The British, the reason we had to go to war with the British is because the British weren't running a complex scam on us. They viewed us as a tributary state. They viewed us as a tributary nation because our colonial settlers that started this country came from that land. So they viewed us as we should be subordinate. And they weren't going to allow us to make our own rules. That's why we declared our independence. And that's what made us so dangerous. And that's what makes us dangerous still to this day. Is that that's what the American experiment is. The American experiment is this gap of calculation we leave unexplored as to not preclude miracles, while we still try to pursue and obtain the highest level and construction of freedom and prosperity that we can. That's the American spirit. That's what it is to be American. And it has been since the inception of this country. And there's something so profoundly beautiful about that. It's hard to put into words. I'm not often am I at a loss for words, but trying to describe that, it puts me almost at a loss for words. RFK did it in a great way, eloquently did it this past couple of weeks. What that American spirit really is at bottom. But the point is that the British were never going to allow that. They had to break that. But we're not living under that today. We're living under the British Empire's intellectual ideas, absolutely. And we find ourselves in this strange kabuki theater where we say we're fighting against white supremacy and neocolonialism, but all of our foreign policy seems to be British foreign policy. Our foreign policy against Russia is British foreign policy. Our foreign policy against China is British foreign policy. Our foreign policy there in the Middle East is British foreign policy. All the wars we're fighting all around the world stem from a British ideology. But these leftists and progressives say that they're anti-colonialism. I mean, I know they're just doing it to lie to you, really. But it is comical. It is, because the contradiction is so obvious. But the point is, this is meant to break our country. The entanglement of foreign markets, the interest rates, the inflation of the cost of living here that sends our labor there. Okay, and they say, well, black people don't want to do those jobs. Or Americans don't want to do those jobs. Yeah, no shit, they don't want to do those jobs. No shit, there's certain jobs that they don't want to do because they know the cost of living in their own country. Don't tell me that some illegal immigrant from Venezuela is fulfilling some much needed gap in the American workforce because they're willing to take less pay. Of course they're willing to take less pay. They're coming from an entirely different economy. They're coming from an entirely different cultural view of the standard of living and the quality of living. What kind of scam is that? What kind of scam is it for your American mainstream media to give you HGTV, Trading Places, build some modern, a renovated, luxurious side by side. I mean, that is what the mainstream media has said for the American mind to view as a reasonable standard of living. That's what they use in the metrics when you're in the family court. When you're in the family court, the standard of living is a consensus driven by modern culture. But then all of a sudden, you're going to tell me that some Venezuelan with some Venezuelan perspective on economy and money and the standard of living and work gets to compete with me for a job? And the answer is to shoot the job down the chain to somebody who comes from a completely different worldview rather than bring the corporate elite and their Ponzi scheme to a more humble place? What kind of fucking scam are we running here? And this ain't about Democrats and Republicans. This is about how the system comes together and moves itself forward. This got nothing to do with party. This is about the way the money works. And this is why they don't invite me on MSNBC or CNN, because their goal is to make me seem like some far right-wing extremist and conspiracy theorist when really I'm about as straight down the middle as you can get. Because I'm not worried about the party politics. I'm talking about the way the scam works, the way the money works. Why should you have to compete against an undocumented illegal immigrant in the workforce and have your corporate elites or your political elites tell you that those jobs need to be filled? Well, then the cost of living needs to come down. The inflation needs to subside. The interest rates need to meet the standard that Americans want so that we can put people, American citizens, legal American citizens, in those jobs and still be able to make ends meet by our standard, by the standard of American citizens. And that's what you're doing when you go to cast your vote. That's what you're doing when you go to spend your money. You're making a statement about what you believe that standard should be. So it is racist. Damn it. It is racist for Joe fucking Scarborough to tell me that some job that some Ecuadorian illegal immigrant is going to work at a lower rate than your average American citizen would accept because they've lived up into a full adult year in their life with a certain perspective on the cost of living, the quality of life, and now they have to compete against somebody who we went and exploited their natural resources for and made millions of dollars and sent them here in the first place? But we went to go give them democracy and make them self-determining. Well, why in the process of making them self-determining didn't we teach them to take their little population, which is much smaller than ours usually, they take their little population and they assess the natural resources and the natural advantages they have for their part of the world, for their country, and they build a thriving or they build a productive economy on the back of that understanding. And they disseminate that to their people and say, you don't have to go anywhere. You should be proud to be a Venezuelan. You should be proud to be an Ecuadorian. You should be proud to be wherever they are. You should be proud to be where you're from. And we're going to build this country together. You know why? Because they don't like the idea of people anywhere having any pride in their national identity. This is the twofer. This is the threefer. This is how they double and triple and quadruple down on the ideological scam. I know. I don't want to get too deep for you, but this is why they're fucking afraid of me, because they know I see through it with clear eyes. Clear fucking eyes. This is how they double and triple and quadruple down. The reason we didn't want to make any of these countries self-determining is we don't like the idea of national pride as a general rule. We don't want people to have pride in their national identity. And you notice anywhere we go, shit is just ruined. Anywhere we go, shit is ruined. It's ruined by design. Do we bring some things? Do we bring some modernity? Yeah, but just enough to keep the people on the teat. Just enough to keep the people on the welfare. This is why the conservative mainstream media doesn't like me on. And I'm just keeping it real. I'm giving it to you raw. Some of them even in the movement. They don't want me on because they don't want to go that deep. They don't want to have to get. It's easier to play the black, white, the left, right, the Republican, Democrat. It's easier to play that game. That's an easier dynamic to draw from. It's easier to draw water from that. It's easier to draw the substance from that, the fruit from that. It's easier to draw and get that fruit from that. It's easier to sell that. But the truth is much, much deeper. Much more. It's much more encapsulating. It really is. Everywhere we go, it's shit. Everywhere we go, everywhere we are, it's shit. For the most part. For the most part, we bring some good things. But look at where we've gone mostly. Okay, let's just be honest. China, we put a totalitarian regime in charge. Every one of those countries over there in Asia, they bend the knee to the Chinese because they have to, in some way, shape, or form. That's the reality. India, never really been our deal. Always been talk about the East India Trading Company. I mean, India has always been a British project. Okay, so India is kind of its own thing, but hell, the living conditions there in India are awful. They have the one and I like Modi. Modi's a nationalist. He's trying to change it. It's a big hill to climb because they got 1.3 billion people. I mean, how do you the more people you have in some sense, the tougher it's going to be to try and create some resemblance of prosperity. That is a deep, deep spiritual project. Not one that we should abandon, not one we should let these globalists say, well, yeah, the problem is population. The problem is population growth. No, that's not the answer. The answer isn't there's too many people. The answer is the spiritual work is going to be the remedy to large-sized populations that are going to naturally cause disparity. And that's going to come through education and a higher and more evolved formulation of the way that you view meaning in your life. It's what Christianity did for people. You could be a poor man, but still be a giant in the eyes of God. And in the eyes of man, because of in the eyes of God. This is I'm not even going to go to preaching. The point is, the one clear-cut project of the British that still exists, being India, is one of the worst caste systems or class, disparities in the whole world. So India's got some big problems, okay? Let's mosey on down to South America. Big problems. Big issues. But we're all there. We're all raping them for natural resources. And don't let them tell you we're not. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Every nook and cranny we can. We're baron robbers is what we are, what we've been. That's been our foreign policy. Drugs, piracy, slavery. That is the remnant of colonialism that we have inherited from the days of World War II, let's say, as a marker, but even before that, where we've indulged in this British business model. The British model of the East India Trading Company. Drugs, piracy, slavery. The first drug that was the real drug trade was sugar. We all know about the slave trade. And the piracy is we see it, you got it, we see it, we come take it. Now we might strike up a deal as a workaround to keep everything looking like it's above board, but the real truth of it, we're strong arming you. We're strong arming you in Afghanistan. That's what we're doing. We can use Osama bin Laden as a cover story or a scapegoat, but we were strong arming them. We were strong arming the Afghani people as a cover for the global community so that everybody could turn a blind eye while we raped Afghanistan for their poppy. That's what we did. That's what we did. I mean, how do you explain Afghanistan going from a 3% poppy production to 93% of the world's poppy production? And afterward, we get an opioid crisis all around the world, but it's specifically here in America. Can I get an amen? Okay. Okay, we don't want to talk that real. Okay. Okay. I get it. I get it. That hits too deep. Heavy. It's heavy. I get it. Niggas ain't even supposed to think about shit like that. When you niggers start thinking that much, you're way out of line. All we need you to do is get up on the stage and move your hands and put on a pretty smile and cackle at the moments where you should be providing substance. That's what we need you niggas to do. And we need you niggas to vote for those people. That's all we need you niggas for. We need you niggas, you exceptional Negroes. We need you exceptional niggas who are good looking. We need you exceptionally good looking Negroes who can hold a conversation at least, just mildly. We need you Negroes to get up on stage. We need you to smile and wave. We need you to cackle and laugh at the very moment where you should be talking about substance, and we need the rest of you niggas to vote for them. As soon as you niggas start talking about the way that the world is actually structured, not the way they teach you as a cover story in the universities and then disseminate through the media. I mean the way the world is actually structured historically from an evidence-based point of view. As soon as you niggas start to talking about that, all you niggas are conspiracy theorists. But tell me which part of what I laid out over this hour and 35 minutes is a conspiracy. None of it's a conspiracy. All of it's verifiable. All of it's verifiable. Go look up Realpolitik, Henry Kissinger, Zygmunt Brzezinski, Klaus Schwab. Look at their ideology. Look at their closeness to secular humanism and Marxist or communist ideology. Look at the rise of China there in the 70s with Nixon. Okay, go ahead. Just go ahead and look at it. It's there for you to find, and then go and search the managed decline of the West, and go look at when your political elites and your economic and corporate elites started to concede that the West was in decline, inevitable decline, and the only thing left to do was for them, conveniently, to manage that decline. Just go look it up for yourself, and you'll realize that we're living smack dab in the middle of it now. And this trade policy. This foreign policy that's at the root of our political identity as a country and subsequently as citizens, this trade policy is all doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Kill the country. Because you can't have a global government. You can't have a one world government. You can't have a global totalitarian dystopia with a strong America. It's not possible. It's not possible. The American spirit is rooted in this profound sense of independence, inalienable rights, that our rights weren't granted to us by the government. They were granted to us by a creator. That was the departure from the status quo of monarchical Europe. Is in monarchical Europe, you had the church and you had the monarchs and you had what they called the divine right of kings, and that your rights were mostly granted to you and extended to you by the grace and charity of the king, and thus the government, the ruling class. That underneath the ruling class, you're really nothing. There was a departure from that. Our founding fathers created and wrote a departure from that ideology. And that's where we remain today. About half of us. And what I've been thinking about the last couple of days is that, the real departure that American citizenship in America represents, that American spirit, the real departure from the status quo and the uh, in the broadest consideration of historical evidence, um, The greatest departure is that most people throughout history uh, lived under tyranny. In fact, you could say that that what Abraham and the Judeo-Christian ethic and God and you know, this idea of the free will and free thought and freedom in general, that this idea of freedom was God placing the just even pulling the Hebrews from Egypt, you know, is that God placed freedom, you know, individual freedom on earth as the highest aspiration of human existence. That really is what the departure was of this country and of Western society and the Judeo-Christian ethic. That individual freedom is the highest, and not just individual freedom, but righteous individual freedom, and thus you could say righteous individually driven governance is the highest aspiration, organization, formulation of human existence. Damn, that is beautiful. Man, that is so beautiful. It you know, it almost brings me to tears. It really is that beautiful. But that is what has to be destroyed because it was just a sliver of hope to begin with. A sliver of hope across the entire backdrop of human civilization, the entire backdrop that is the history of human civilization, where in most cases people either accepted or in some ways even crave tyranny. That the fallen nature of man is something like going back to the garden. The fallen nature of man is that man had that autonomy and freedom. That man was close to God and became estranged from God through sin and our own choices. So we were cursed to sweat by the toil of our brow. So in that cursing of needing to work, the best way to do it is to accept tyranny. That way I can scapegoat my spiritual, my intellectual shortcomings onto a greater authority than myself. And it's no wonder why in that whole equation we find ourselves cozying up next to Satan, another rebel, another usurper, another mutineer of God. Of course, of course. But there is still that sliver. There are still those that understand the value of individual freedom, that understand the value of what America is built on, that American spirit, that tiny gap where we show the humility. We don't want to solve every equation. We want to leave some room for God to operate. We want to leave some space for God to intervene and do mysterious and great things. We don't want to be the end all be all. We don't want to know everything. We don't want to be the Alpha and the Omega. We don't have that desire. We want to get right up to the line. We want to get right up to the line. And as soon as we start to cross over, we pray that God gives us the discernment to know when we've gone too far. When we've gone too far, when we want to create robots that have human brains when the human brains aren't even right, where we want to create babies and factories. We want to create clone armies is what we want to create, where we want to create artificial intelligence that censors everybody broadly so the government doesn't have to do it directly. We don't want to go that far. We need to not go that far. I'm warning you now. I'm telling you, we go that far, we're in big trouble because it's not going to be God's punishment. It's not going to be God's wrath. God loves us. He would much rather us choose not to go down that road. It's going to be a lesson. It's going to be a hard felt lesson that we have to learn about just how bad shit can get and you think things are great there in China. And go back to my point. And there's a reason why it was China. There's a reason why China is the new beacon on the hill for this globalist establishment. The reason why it's China is because China doesn't have those boundaries. They already had and have a cultural rejection of God. They already had an empirical and sort of totalitarian, tyrannical, culture. Going back to the ancient Chinese civilization. The reason why the Chinese are so ahead of us, the reason why the Chinese seem to have this sort of cultural cohesion is because they systematically went and killed all of the rebels, all of the different the Chinese empire, the current country that is China went through thousands of years of civil war to whittle its population down to this 1.5 billion Chinese people that in most ways broadly accept the governance of the Communist Chinese Party. They don't have that heritage, that history of rebellion in this sense of individual freedom. They have a collectivist mentality. It was beaten into them by thousands of years, by generations of civil war, where people stood up and people died and were killed and were mass slaughtered. And then you had Mao, and Mao decided to go through the countryside and rid himself of all of the usurpers, all of the rebels. They live with that cultural memory, which is why they were chosen. They were chosen by Kissinger and those to be the epicenter of the future global society. One belt, one road. And you think the people there in China are happy because you fly into Beijing and the airport is clean? You think that's a sign that they're happy, they're a thriving country? Yeah, but you miss the subtlety of the lack of freedom. And you think because you get some testimony from the Chinese people that they're doing just fine, that means that they are. In what world? They're living under a tyrannical government. They believe they can't speak out against the Chinese government. Their family will be retaliated against. And that's where we're headed right now. The managed decline of the West, the second law of thermonuclear dynamics, the inexorable rise of China. They were chosen for a reason. They were chosen because they don't have those guardrails. They will kill you, and in fact, they will kill their own people to make sure that China comes out on top. The only chance we have to do, and this was the lie they told. I almost forgot this part. When China decided to rise up, when China's economy started to grow, when China's power started to solidify itself on the world stage, all of our elites told us there was no problem. That by us being, entangled, by us being, intertwined with the Chinese and their economy, we would make them more like us. That's what we said. That's what the Kissingers and everybody said. That was their claim. That we would make the Chinese more like us during their rise, and the exact opposite has happened. We became more like them. But it depends on what street corner you're on. It depends how you look at it. If you're saying more like us, and then in that they have this industrial base, or they have this affinity for technology and economic growth, or business and trade, if you say more like us in that sense, well, then you're just admitting that what's great about China is the colonial business model that we built our country on. For all you leftists and progressives that say white supremacy and neocolonialism is the problem, China is just an example of an evolution of that same business model. Perfected, you could say. Because when you're a communist and a Marxist, you reduce the human existence down to price. The reason why the Chinese are beating everybody else is because they don't carry the same cultural ethics and values about human life, so they can beat everybody in price because their labor is going to constantly be cheap for their national interest. But that isn't how the Chinese that isn't the equation. The way that we became more like the Chinese and not vice versa is we are slowly but surely being pulled into this geopolitical competition where we have to surrender that gap that we leave for God to pursue national security, where we are going to go over the cliff of artificial intelligence and ecto farms and robotics and any other number of transhuman fourth industrial revolution ideas in order to keep up with the Chinese because they don't have those guardrails around God. And this is where our arrogance is going to get us into trouble. This is where they say, stay true to your identity. When you're a basketball team, you win and you lose with your identity. You got to adapt. Don't get me wrong. You make changes on the fly. But if we're the LA Lakers, and I don't mean to use Shaq as an example because I think, whatever. I'm not trying to use any one of these celebrities because I don't know what side of football they're on. But my point is, when we're the LA Lakers and we're on a 3-championship run and we're throwing the ball into Shaq, we're throwing the ball into Shaq. That's our identity. Until Shaq fouls out, we're throwing the ball into Shaq. The throwing the ball into Shaquille O'Neal, I don't mean to make an obscure basketball reference. It's something so deep and serious, but I am who I am. I'm an athlete. When I'm a mixed martial artist and my keep it simple, I got a great low kick. I'm going to the low kick. I'm going to the low kick till I can't go to the low kick anymore. What our low kick is, what our throwing it into Shaq is American independence. Is American independence, the idea that our citizens believe in individual freedom. We don't kowtow or bend the knee or concede for global governance or any form of tyrannical governance because it's more convenient. That's not a part of our identity. And if we concede that identity to pursue competition with the Chinese, we will lose because we can't do it better than they can because it's not in us to do it better than they do it. And what's scary about it is your elites, that the thing that ties together the Chinese Communist Party and some of your political elites is their communist ideology. Their communist, Marxist, socialist ideology. And just ask yourself, when the CCP takes over, the same CCP that would just as soon kill any of their own people in the pursuit of geopolitical superiority, if they would gladly or willingly kill any of their own people, who do these elites think what golden parachute do these elites think that they're going to have in a China-centric society, a China-centric global society? What golden parachute do they think that they're gonna retire to the countryside there in Europe to some aristocratic position like during the fall of the Roman Empire? See, they don't know that, and this is where the tragedy. Let's call it a tragedy for lack of a better term. This is the poetic justice and sort of tragic nature of the Marxist the Marxist phenomenon. Is there's no honor amongst thieves, and they are thieves at heart. And so one Marxist can't trust another Marxist. And that's why you see the left constantly cannibalizing itself on the public stage. Don Lemon's great until he's not, and then we're gonna take Don Lemon off, or Al Franken's great until he's not, and then we're gonna go after Al Franken, or Chris Cuomo is great until he's not, and then we're gonna go after Chris Cuomo. They'll go after anybody they need to. And there's no rhyme or reason. It's just it's manic is what it is. It's manic. It's this dysphoric disassociation of reality, this kind of collective hive mind sort of groupthink. So on any given day, when one sort of I don't know, idea gets into the ether, and it's like that what do they call it, that Poison Ivy had that mist that she kind of just spread, and kind of as it hits each person knows, they come under her spell. No, one kind of idea gets into the ether, and before you know it, they're attacking some other group. They're attacking some other person on their own side. And that's what's in store for these posh aristocratic elites, these political elites, this permanent political class, and this sort of scientific managerial elite. When Beijing rules, they're not going to get a golden parachute. They're going to get lined up and shot in the back of the head. And you'd be a damn fool to follow them. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us and help support the movement. Help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that is exactly what they're trying to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast. I appreciate your listenership and viewership today and in the future. Stay tuned tomorrow morning for the Royce White Show on Real America's Voice at 9 a.m. Eastern. I got some campaign obligations, so I'm not able to host War Room tomorrow. But I hope that you all stay tuned for War Room and Steve Bannon's stead. And our thoughts and prayers are with the great Steve Bannon, who is one of the original and most formidable China hawks there is in American society, which is another reason why they went after him and threw him in jail, as well as Peter Navarro. Shout out to Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon. I hope I did the China conversation some justice today. And obviously I bring my own flavor to it, my own feel of it. It's much more spiritual than people give it credit for. It's not just economic. It's not just trade. There's a very spiritual element to it, a very culturally spiritual element to it. We have to leave some gap for God to operate. As soon as we try and close the door on that gap for God to operate, we're doomed. We're doomed. We're in for a rude awakening. So that's it. The fight continues. The people are coming. And as always, Godspeed.